And Mike is with the Peace River, Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. I'm Mike Coates with the Water Supply Authority, as you indicated. I'll be doing a presentation today. With me today is Dr. Tony Janicki. Dr. Janicki has been monitoring the Peace River for about the last 30 years. He and his company do our hydrobiological monitoring program, and he will be with me to answer any questions you've got. He does not have a presentation to give. The authority has quite a few monitoring programs, and of course each of those are designed for a specific purpose. Some of them deal with our permits, regulatory, some of them are voluntary, some of them help us in our operational aspects of the water treatment plant, but all of them provide us with information about this system, about the Peace River and its tributaries. And that's a very helpful data group to develop, because it helps us understand what's normal and what's not normal in the system. Helps us identify trends and helps us manage that resource. Let's see if I can get this thing to work.
Mike, if I may, before you go forward, would you be so kind as kind of explain for those who may not be familiar with the authority, what the authority actually is, and Desoto County's participation and membership and ownership in the authority?
Sure. The Peace Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority is a regional drinking water utility. We serve 4 counties, Desoto County, Charlotte, Manatee, and Sarasota County. We also provide water to the city of Northport. We have 4 board members on our board that direct our activities, 1 commissioner from each of those counties. We have a water supply, facility on the Peace River in Desoto County called the Peace River Facility. You probably drove by it if you came down Kings Highway. Right now, we supply about 30 million gallons of water a day to our customers. We do not supply any water yet to Manatee County, so all that water goes to Sarasota, Charlotte, DeSoto, and the city of Northport. Eventually, we will supply water to Manatee County. So that is just in summary of what the Water Supply Authority does. We, of course, monitor the Peace River heavily, and we have been for decades. Because it is our water supply source. That source provides about 40% of the water used in our region. So let me see if I can get this thing to work. Am I pushing the wrong button here? Down button. Okay. I think I got it. The table that you see here lists the major monitoring programs, the water quality monitoring programs that the Water Supply Authority conducts. And the programs that I want to talk about today are these here. They're shown in stars. These are the programs that monitor the Peace River and its tributaries. Some of the programs, like the Hydrobiological Monitoring Program, or HBMP on here, have been ongoing for upwards of 45 years. I'll also touch briefly on the Horse Creek Stewardship Program. Shannon Gonzalez with Flatwoods Consulting will be giving you a detailed presentation on that a little bit later. The monitoring programs that we have, particularly the long-term programs on the Peace River and its tributaries, provide just an invaluable set of data for those resources. It helps us understand the system so we can recognize what's normal and what's not. The water quality and environmental conditions in our basin are affected by the physical conditions and the land use in the basin. There are many different types of land uses, but they can be broadly categorized into these four categories that are shown here. This is a map of the Peace River Basin showing those land use categories from about 13 years ago. Most of the land, you see about 80%, was either in agricultural production or in a natural, relatively undisturbed state. A little more than 20% of the basin at that time was in urban use or mining. And that land use is changing. This is a 10-year projection of future land use in the basin. And within the Peace River Basin, you see that urban and mining land uses are expanding. Agricultural land use is declining, but the agricultural activities that are going on are transitioning from low-intensity ag activities like improved pasture to row crops. And the acreage of native uplands and wetlands is declining. These changes can have an effect on the water quality and the timing of freshwater flow in the system. And these quality and timing changes are some of the things that our monitoring programs help us identify. The first program that I want to talk about is the authority's Hydrobiological Monitoring Program, or HBMP. And that's a program that monitors the Peace River in the very uppermost part of Charlotte Harbor. The program was started about 45 years ago by the original owner of the Peace River Water Treatment Plant. That was General Development. The monitoring program was a requirement of the first water use permit that was issued for the Peace River facility back in 1975. And that requirement to monitor this system continues today on our water use permit. The original intent of the monitoring program was to determine whether withdrawals at the Peace River facility were having an adverse effect on the Peace River and the upper part of the harbor. The HBMP has changed over the last 45 years. The early focus of that program was primarily on biology and water quality in the system. We monitored juvenile fish, adult fish, plankton, benthic organisms like clams and oysters. They monitored submerged aquatic vegetation, riparian vegetation, water quality, and flow. And the results of those various monitoring efforts, what they have shown us is that if the water quality and the freshwater flow and timing of that flow is right, the system is right. The system works. So as the program is developed now, it focuses primarily on water quality and flow and less on biology. This program is conducted in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey. It includes 11 sites where data are collected continuously using monitoring devices mounted on pilings or other structures like you see in that picture on the top right. And we have 16 stations where data are collected monthly from boats. The maps shown here identify locations of those data collection efforts. Top left are continuous monitors, continuous recorders mounted on pilings in the river. The bottom right are the stations monitored by boats. And if you read the numbers on here, you'll see that these numbers represent a river kilometer upstream from the mouth of the Peace River, which is, I had a pointer on here, maybe I could show, which is an imaginary line running from Punta Gorda Point over to Hog Island. So each one of those numbers on there represents a river kilometer, either upstream or downstream of that. So data are collected. Those data are analyzed by the scientists involved in this program, like Dr. Janicki and his staff. Those data and analysis are compiled into reports annually, then sent to the Water Management District as part of our permit. The data are also uploaded into the Florida Water Information Network, so they're available to the public. Every 5 years, we also develop a comprehensive report on all of the data that's collected in this program. And that comprehensive report looks all the way back to the beginning of this data collection effort and presents the findings of whatever's happened since monitoring began on here about 45 years ago. So these are the data that are collected in this table at the 11 fixed stations. Not all of this data is collected at each of the stations, but it's a sampling of, this is all data collected at some of these stations. This is the program that I mentioned on the previous slide. The temperature and conductivity data that you see on here allows us to estimate salinity in the river. And this helps us evaluate whether withdrawals from the Peace River facility are moving at saltwater interface. It also provides us with an estimate of salinity of the water at our water intake on the Peace River, and that's critically important to us because we can't take salinity out of the water with our treatment process. So we need to know what the salinity is at our intake. And the picture that you see here is that monitoring device. It's a U.S. Geological Survey monitoring device on the Water Supply Authority's intake on the Peace River. That gives us real-time data on salinity there. So we use the data from these stations, the conductivity data, and we also use flow data from these sites that are upstream of our Peace River facility in our analysis of what's going on the river. And we also use it in our day-to-day operations. These are some pictures of data that are downloaded from the U.S. Geological Survey sites on the river. On the left-hand side, temperature from the recorder that's on our intake on the Peace River. And on the right-hand side are stage and flow data from the Peace River at Arcadia, which is just downstream of State Route 72. Not only are these data used for the long-term analysis, but what this data tells us for operational issues today is that for example, on I think it's the 16th of December, the water quality at our intake was very good. Total dissolved solids around 250. It also tells us that the flow in Arcadia would have allowed us to take about 140 million gallons that day if we had need for that. So it does double duty, these sites do. At the 16 stations that we talked about that are sampled by boat, we collect this top set of data at all of the stations. temperature, pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen. Those are collected at every one of those stations. It helps us augment the data that are collected at the 11 fixed stations. In addition to that, the data that are shown here are collected at 5 of the stations. So we collect 17 parameters at 5 of those stations. Data like chloride and color help us identify groundwater influence on the river. Data like the nitrogen series and orthophosphate help us track nutrient loading in the river. And of course, nutrient loading can drive algal blooms. And as well, this data also helps us identify probable sources for those nutrients, either natural or related to human activity. And also measuring chlorophyll gives us a measure of algae concentration in the river. This monitoring helps us understand the estuarine system, how it changes with flow, how it changes with seasons, how it changes with tropical events. Charlotte Harbor is an incredibly productive estuary, and that productivity is largely due to the freshwater inflow and the organic load coming down the river and the timing of that organic load coming down the river that feeds the harbor. For example, in June, the rainfall usually fills the swamps, depressional areas, that spills over into the tributaries, which spill over into the river, all of that carrying debris, leaf litter, a lot of organic carbon, and that organic carbon comes down and feeds the bottom of the food chain in Charlotte Harbor, and the bottom of the food chain feeds the middle of the food chain, which feeds the top of the food chain. So it's important to have that big first flush, especially, of nutrients that come down the river in the spring. So let's look at a few of the results that we've seen from our program. And what I'll be going over is the results from just one station in this program. This is station 30.7, which is 30.7 kilometers upriver from the mouth of the river. You can see it up here. It's just upstream of the authority's intake on the Peace River. What we see for total dissolved solids, which are indicated by conductivity, is that there's an upward trend, a slight upward trend in that. And that's believed to be due to an increase in groundwater entering the system via irrigation runoff. Irrigation water, groundwater in this area, has higher total dissolved solids, and those get into the river from irrigation. We'll look at orthophosphate, nitrogen, and chlorophyll in the next couple of slides. This is a picture of orthophosphate concentrations through time at that same station, just upstream from our intake. And we see a declining trend overall. It's probably due to improved best management practices by agriculture that reduce fertilizer runoff, better management at mine sites, and more recently, the structural improvements that Whitman has completed at Lake Hancock. Whoops, what happened? Oh, there it is. At Lake Hancock, which is at the top of the watershed. If you note, you see some increases here in the 2004 to 2008 time frame associated with a bunch of tropical storms and hurricanes during that period. We had Charlie, Francis, Janine, Olga, a number of others. These tropical weather events and the huge rainfall events that occur associated with them throughout the basin cause discharge from areas in the watershed that only flush during these high-intensity events. And high rainfall also overwhelms wastewater systems, resulting in spills. And in that same time frame, It also corresponds with the beginning of the closure activities at the USAC Gymstack on Payne Creek, which also discharged during this period. So you see these weather upsets associated, are these upsets in the nutrient loading associated with these tropical weather activities. The nitrogen data are shown here for that same site. They show quite a bit more scattered than the orthophosphorus data, but also a slight trend downward in the last 40 years. Again, probably due to a number of factors, including better implementation of agricultural BMTs and more recently improvements at Lake Hancock. Now, while there's a lot of scatter in this data, we do still see some higher levels in 2004 to 2007, and some higher levels in 2017 and 18. Again, likely associated with tropical weather upsets that we talked about before. This is chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll is the chemical responsible for photosynthesis. Algae rely on photosynthesis. So chlorophyll is really an indirect measure of algal concentrations in the river. Algae concentrations typically increase with nutrient loading and also with water clarity, so you get better light penetration. If you note for the past 22 years here, chlorophyll levels have remained relatively stable on average, with the exception of spikes in 2004, 2008, and 2017 and 18. Again, associated with those tropical disturbances and the upsets they cause in the system. So our hydrobiological monitoring program results are showing some improvement in nutrient concentrations in the system, like I said, with the exception of tropical weather upsets in the system. The next program I want to touch briefly on is the Horse Creek Stewardship Program. The Horse Creek Basin covers about 225 square miles of Manatee, Hardy, and Desoto County, as you can see it here on the map. This is a collaborative monitoring effort between the Water Supply Authority and Mosaic. It's the result of a settlement from a mine permitting challenge in 2003. The program has been monitoring conditions in Horse Creek for the last 17 years. And that includes biology, water quality, and flow monitoring. There is phosphate mining ongoing in the upper part of the basin. And this program, of course, is intended to help identify if there are changes in the water quality of Horse Creek and the biology of Horse Creek associated with mining, and provide a baseline condition for the advance of mining should it occur in that part of the basin. Now, there's a reasonable concern about the impact on water supply operations of a dam breach or a spill in the mine in the upper part of the Horse Creek Basin, because that obviously would eventually make its way down fairly close to our intake. So an early warning system was installed by Mosaic out here on State Road 64 at Horse Creek downstream of the mine. That system monitors turbidity in the stream, which would be very high in water that's coming from a breach in a clay settling pond dam. If such an event were to occur, there are a bunch of authority employees that get a text message on their phone and an email. And note that this location is 32 miles river from our intake on Horse Creek. That's a travel time of about 1.5 days. So a spill that occurred at the mine would take about 1.5 days to make it down to our intake. So we've got adequate time given the system to shut down the pumps. We would run on reservoir storage until the spill has passed, and our sampling shows that pumping is safe to resume. While this wouldn't provide an environmental protection for Horse Creek for such an event, it certainly does provide a measure of protection for our water supply. Next up, I want to talk about Peace River Whitman Creek monitoring program. This program was set up as a voluntary program to gain an understanding of the water quality impacts on the Peace River from Gymstack closure and the discharge of closure waters, those closure waters to Whitman Creek, which is a tributary, of course, of the Peace River. Just to give you an idea of where it is, Whitman Creek is by that blue arrow up there. So the USAC Gymstack closure activities at Whitman Creek began 2004-2005 period, and what we monitor is 10 stations on the river, and 2 of those stations are upstream of Whitman Creek. One is at where Whitman Creek enters the Peace River, and then the other 7 are downstream of that. And we've been monitoring those stations since 2007. The list of water quality parameters and constituents is similar to that monitored for the HBMP and the Horse Creek Stewardship Program. Heavy in nutrients and constituents associated with phosphate. Note that there is monitoring in the Peace River upstream and downstream of Whitman Creek, so we get that difference, of course, upstream and downstream. In the next few slides, you'll see that plotted in a couple of graphs moving from north to south. These are the results from samples that were collected on June 6, 2019. And for reference on this graph, you see this is total dissolved solids concentration on the y-axis. These are station numbers on the x-axis. The station numbers from north to south. So they move from up here to down here. Station 1 and 2 are both upstream of Whitman Creek. Station 3 is Whitman Creek, and Station 10 is downstream near Horse Creek. You can see the total dissolved solids concentration is relatively low at these first 2 stations upstream. Whitman Creek, it pops up to about 500 milligrams per liter, which is actually the drinking water limit for total dissolved solids. You don't see much of a change, a little bit of a change in all the way down to, this is Joshua Creek, and Joshua Creek is affected quite substantially by irrigation runoff. So we see another increase in TDS Joshua Creek, and it comes down due to dilution. At this period, this time frame, the flow in the Peace River was relatively low, about 70 cubic feet per second at Fort Meade. That's a dry season flow. During the wet season, we would see a much more muted effect from this input just because of dilution. So we see a similar response in phosphorus concentrations coming from Whitman Creek. Same station numbers on the bottom, phosphorus concentrations on the y-axis. Upstream ranges from 0.0 to a little more than 1. At Whitman Creek, it pops up to above 3 milligrams per liter, so there's a significant increase at Whitman Creek, and then a general decline throughout the rest of the Peace River, simply due to dilution and no more significant inputs from that. So what do we learn from this? We've learned that Gymstack closures, at least at this site, do adversely affect the water quality in the immediate area of the stack. The program gives us information on water quality impacts that might be observed in future closure activity. Our intake, fortunately, is about 50 miles downriver from Whitman Creek, and we withdraw most of our supply during high flow conditions, not the low flow conditions you saw here. So dilution and distance are working for us in this case, and we have not seen an adverse effect of this closure on our water supply operations. The last program I want to highlight is our monitoring of water quality in the river at our intake. And this supports both long-term understanding of our source and the daily operations of the plant and management of the reservoir system. Like all these programs, this adds to our understanding of the river system and the water quality changes that we should expect that are business as usual and those that aren't. In 2009, we implemented a twice-a-year sampling of river water for a full suite of primary and secondary drinking water parameters, 86 parameters that are evaluated twice a year here. The program helps us build that important baseline of water quality in our source. These show that the river water quality is good, and where it doesn't meet drinking water standards are in the parameters like turbidity and color, which are the very parameters that the treatment process is designed to handle. As we move from the twice-a-year monitoring of the full drinking water suite, now we look at weekly monitoring when we are withdrawing water from the river. And in this program, we run a suite of samples that are similar to those collected in the HPMP and the Horse Creek Stewardship Program. And these help us understand what we're loading into our reservoir system. For example, sampling a chlorophyll A gives us information on algal production. We're not too keen on loading the reservoir with a bunch of algae, and so when algae counts are high, chlorophyll A counts are high, we turn the pumps off. We don't want algal blooms in the reservoir. That, of course, is one of the benefits of having an off-stream reservoir. So we don't have to take the water that's coming down the river. If it doesn't meet our criteria, we let it go by. Daily to support treatment process control of the plant, and this has been ongoing since 1980 when the plant went online. These parameters are focused on helping the treatment facilities run efficiently. Parameters like alkalinity and hardness, total organic carbon, and turbidity are monitored all the way through from the river to the reservoir system to the treatment process. We also monitor, of course, algae counts on a daily basis to keep us from seeding the reservoir with an algal bloom. One of the interesting and beneficial outcomes of this is that in the spring, when that first flush of water comes down the river, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, that's carrying all that organic load that feeds the harbor, we let that go by because it feeds the harbor and we don't need it to feed our reservoir. So this program helps us in the management of that reservoir system. Mr. Chairman, those are the monitoring programs and just some of the results that we've seen from our work on the Peace River and its tributaries. In closing, on behalf of the Water Supply Authority, I want to thank you for the opportunity to highlight these programs. We collect and we have always collected just an enormous amount of data on the river and its tributaries that support our understanding of this system as an environmental resource and as a drinking water supply. Our programs have always been collaborative. We share our data, our analysis with whoever wants it. That data is available on the WIN network. If there's anything we can do to help you in this process, please let us know. We are more than willing to share any data we've got with anybody. So with that, my presentation's concluded. If you've got any questions or you want to leave them until everybody's finished.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to ask our commissioners if they have any questions for you while you're up here. I have a couple, but I'll wait for you if you have any.
I just wanted to, Mike, on the Peace River, Whitman Creek, it said that you test 1 to 3 times a year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I was just curious, just why not like once a quarter? Is there any specific reason, just 1 to 3 times a year?
It's whenever we have staff available. We try and do it on some seasonal basis. We try and get a dry season, a wet season. So it's not a required program. We could monitor it a little bit more frequently, but we just don't have a lot of staff to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you, Mike. Looks like we have a lot of really good data, and data lets us make good decisions, so it's good to understand that a little bit better. One thing I was curious about is what's the length of time that we can run at our current consumption level without withdrawing from the river?
Right now, we are full in the reservoir system, and I think we've got about somewhere around 9 billion gallons in the aquifer storage and recovery system. So we could run for nearly a year on what we've got.
Okay, thank you. And I heard you say that with that advanced warning system, we can shut down if there is an event way upstream, and that solves the immediate problem of water quality for drinking, but the environmental impacts could go beyond that. So if the environmental impacts kept the water quality not suitable for a longer period of time than that 1 year, what would that look like, and what would we do?
We would just have to hope that it doesn't last for that long. We have other sources in the region, and with our interconnected pipelines, we can rotate to those other sources. But there would be shortages because we're the second biggest water supply in the region. Manatee County is the largest, but that would create a problem.
So our interconnection wouldn't allow us to utilize the same number.
Our interconnections would keep us in water for some period of time. Well, a storage would keep us in water for a long period of time. Interconnections, even more than that. But if we had to shut off for more than a year, we might have a problem.
I had one other question I wanted to ask you about, and you may know the answer to it, you may not. The lead time for spill warning right now, it basically is a day and a half because the turbidity detection devices are like 30 miles north, 32 miles
Correct.
north. Yeah. So if we had some problems with the discharge site in Desoto County that was a lot closer, how would that lead time affect your ability to handle that at the plant?
It would obviously be shorter. We'll have to look at moving that monitoring, that emergency monitoring down in the Horse Creek further, but it would shorten it.
Do you think that we would be able to get that notification and shut down the pumping in an adequate amount of time, or is that a question you don't know the answer to?
I think based on what I've seen from the proposed mine plans, we're still going to have at least a number of hours in there to shut things down. assuming we can get that notification within a couple of hours. Shutting off the pumps is just like that, assuming we get the notification in a couple of hours.
Right. Okay, thank you. Did you have any more questions, Commissioners?
Yeah, I do. Now that we brought that up, you said at one point that with the water supply, we have not, Manatee is not a part of it at this time, right?
Manatee is one of our, they're one of our members,
Yes.
but they do not take any water from the Water Supply Authority yet. We expect that they will take water from us sometime in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to call up Shannon Gonzalez from Flatwoods Consulting Group next. And I'd like to add, for those members of the public via Zoom or here in person, they will be able to ask questions of our presenters during the public comment period as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. There we go. Good morning. My name is Shannon Gonzalez with Flatwoods Consulting Group in Tampa. And I have been fortunate enough to be part of this Horse Creek Stewardship Program since its inception in 2003. I was actively involved in implementing that program from 2003 to 2009. Took a break for a little bit and have been back involved since 2017, 2018, and Flatwoods is collecting the data currently. I have with me my colleague Isa Ali, and he may be available if you have any technical questions. He is involved in the day-to-day implementation of this program at Flatwoods. So Mike covered this briefly in his presentation, but we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. So this program was created to ensure that mining activities do not adversely affect Horse Creek, the Peace River, or downstream Charlotte Harbor. The program consists, or the components of the plan are monitoring and reporting of stream quality, investigating any adverse conditions that may be observed, and then implementing corrective actions if these adverse conditions are deemed to be related to mining activities. So this is going to be a series of two maps that you'll see, the first of which is the northern Horse Creek or upper Horse Creek Basin. It's in dark blue. You can see on the map that the dark outlines, the various colors, those are mine boundaries. The shaded colors are the various basins. Again, the dark blue is the upper Horse Creek Basin. West Fork Horse Creek is in pink. The Brushy Creek Basin, another tributary to Horse Creek, is in green. But note the HCSW1 is in the yellow and black circle. It's right there at Highway 64 and Horse Creek. That is the uppermost station. That is where the immediate warning system is in place, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and some other parameters are collected there. Downstream of that, again, still in Hardy County, is the HCSW2 station. Just east of that on Brushy Creek, there was a station added several years ago called BCSW1, that is on Brushy Creek in Hardy County. And then moving south, you see that HCSW3 is a station just north of Highway 70 in DeSoto County, and then HCSW4, the southernmost or downstreammost station, is at Highway 72. And we're on Horse Creek. East of Horse Creek is the Peace River, and then we're sitting just east of there in Arcadia. So Mike mentioned in his presentation the relationship between water quantity, water quality, and biology, and that's what we're going to talk about here, the methods and then the results for water quality analysis, the water quantity, and the biology. First, we'll start with water quantity. There are several methods that we use to measure water quantity. The stream levels are measured monthly with gauge readings at the 4 Horse Creek stations. Discharge is monitored through USGS daily stream flow at HCSW1, the uppermost station, and HCSW4, the downstreammost station. And there's continuing Mosaic Npds discharge monitoring when that occurs. Rainfall is also monitored. NOAA has a rainfall gauge at Mac River State Park in Arcadia, the Swift Mud Flatford Swamp daily rainfall gauge, and Mosaic has 3 Upper Horse Creek Basin gauges as well. Water quality is monitored in several different ways. First, we've talked a lot about the continuous sampling at HCSW1. Every 15 minutes, this is an automated reading that captures pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, temperature, and turbidity. Talked about the importance of that turbidity measurement, and to give you a sense of how this works, there is a stilling well there where this information is captured, and every 15 minutes, a reading is taken. If that turbidity reading exceeds the threshold, then an automated text message and email is sent out to various parties, and that requires no human intervention. There's no one out there. That is simply just an automated reading. To date, we've had no readings, and we'll talk about no exceedances that were actually high turbidity for a mining-related incident. We've had some false positives. We've had things like frogs get into the stilling well. We've had low flow and leaf litter and things like that. So that still provides a warning, and so we know that it's working, but yet we have not had any issues. There's also monthly sampling at 4 different stations. They look at qualitative stream conditions. There's field measurements of temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and turbidity. And these monthly sampling stations, twice a year, are split between the Water Supply Authority's independent consultant and Mosaic. So that means they go out there and they both collect samples, and when they're collecting these samples, they're sent to their own labs, and then the results are compared, and that's just a quality assurance check to make sure that the readings are correct, that the sampling is done correctly, the laboratory analysis is correct, and it's all independently verified just as a quality assurance check. And that type of thing is done throughout this process, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we discuss reporting. Then there's additional sampling, water quality sampling that's done that's undertaken when the biological sampling is going on, and those are field parameters, the temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and turbidity.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
Just as we go through this presentation, and I've had the joy of serving on the TAG committee for the last several years, and it's an incredible amount of data. But for general knowledge, when you talk about parameters, as you talk about the Horse Creek Stewardship Program, can you just, on a high level, give what those parameters are? They the drinking water parameters? Are they permit parameters? Can you just clarify that so that we all understand what parameters you're referencing?
Sure, actually, that's a great lead-in. That's the next slide. So, here we have the parameters that we've been talking about. These fall into different categories, physiochemical indicators, nutrients, minerals, things like that. And so these are trigger levels that if there is any exceedance of these trigger levels, then a notification is required. There's some investigation that is undertaken. The tag is notified. And again, this is done monthly. And so every month, when these are collected, and we'll talk about that again in reporting, these things are sent to the Technical Advisory Committee, and they have the ability to discuss that with the Water Supply Authority, with the independent consultants, with Mosaic, with Flatwoods, and we can figure out if there needs to be further investigation or exactly what those exceedances mean. And each of these parameters, each of these things that you see, the reporting units, the trigger levels, each of these is consistent with or even more protective than the state water quality standards, the class 3 water quality standards. Some of them are more protective. Dissolved oxygen saturation, turbidity, and fluoride, actually the trigger level is set lower than class 3 water quality standards. And some of these actually have no class 3 water quality standards, and others are the same as class 3 water quality standards. So these were all developed, these trigger levels were developed as part of this program. Some of these trigger levels were actually put into place before there was a class 3 water quality standard for a particular constituent. But in any case, these are as protective as the state water quality standards for each one. So biology, again, like Mike had said, if the water flow, if the flow is correct in its depth and duration and its timing, and the water quality is there, then the biology should be intact. And that's, that's one thing. We're measuring these things directly by looking at the water quality parameters, by measuring the flow, but we're also looking at the biology to see if that's responding the way it's expected. And benthic macroinvertebrates is a very common measure in streams. There's two standard methodologies that we use. The stream habitat assessment, which we go out and we assess the habitats that are there, their quality and their quantity. And then we also look at the stream conditions index, which is a direct measure of those benthic macroinvertebrates. We take dip net sweeps, we collect these invertebrates, we send them off to a lab for analysis, and then they come back and there's a score that's developed, the SCI score. These are all standard methodologies. They weren't developed for this program, but they're used in this program. They're used statewide by DEP to assess the habitat quality and the conditions of the streams. We use something called the Shannon Diversity Index as the standard statistical method. And then we also sample fish. We sample the fish with a 4x8 seine, and then we also use electrofishing at a standard duration for the fish sampling. We look at species richness, which is just simply the number of fish species that we capture. We use the Shannon Diversity Index, Morris-Cetus Community Similarity Index, and we present a species accumulation curve just for analysis and comparison of these streams. So reporting. This is extremely important because I think this really demonstrates how robust this data collection effort is and how much QA/QC goes into it. I know, Andy, you mentioned that you'd been a part of the technical advisory group. The technical advisory group is Manatee, Sarasota, Charlotte, DeSoto counties. They're participating in this advisory group. They are sitting with the Water Supply Authority, with the Water Supply Authority's consultant, with Mosaic, with Flatwoods. We're all in this together, trying to make sure that this monitoring program is something that is robust and easy to understand and protective of Horse Creek. So the different types of reporting, the immediate notification is the first warning system that is for turbidity. Then the monthly reports of water quality data, those are submitted to the Water Supply Authority and the Technical Advisory Group. There's a third-party review before that data is even accepted. And then we can talk about that and clarify those results that are presented before they're accepted by the group. And then the annual reports are submitted to the Water Supply Authority and the TAG for review. So Mosaic will present these data, all of the data, the monthly information, the biological sampling, and they identify or try to determine whether or not there are any long-term trends, whether they're positive or negative, and then they send that report to the Water Supply Authority and the Technical Advisory Group for review. That group compiles questions, we sit down in a room, we meet about it, we discuss it. Those questions are then sent over and there's responses and clarifications provided by Flatwoods and Mosaic, and then that is incorporated, that document of the question and the response is incorporated into the report. So that whole thing is transparent and it's out there in the public record. And like Mike said, that is something that is available to anyone should they wish to read through it. I will warn you, it is extremely dense. And that actually brings me to this next point. this quality assurance that we have in place takes a lot of time. And so what we're going to look at here when we look at some results are the 2018 results. And the reason that we're presenting 2018 results is because that's the last report that was finalized. So the way this works is, I'll talk about 2019 because we're just about done with that one too. 2019 data are collected up through the end of the calendar year, and then the data are analyzed, the laboratory results the lab goes out, that the lab results, whether it be macroinvertebrates or water quality, that information comes back. Then the statistical analysis begins, then the report writing begins, and as you're writing the report, usually by summer or maybe late summer, early fall, the report draft is ready, sent to the group, and then we begin the QA/QC process and the back and forth between the Water Supply Authority, their consultants, the Technical Advisory Group, and Mosaic. And then by usually just after the first of the year, right now, we are about ready to pull the trigger on the final version of the report that was the 2019 report, that includes the back and forth, those questions and responses and things like that. So it takes about a year after the calendar year ends before a report is finalized. And that is, it's just because there is so much quality assurance, quality control, laboratory analysis, statistical review, things like that that are involved. So we'll talk about the results now. These are just 4 pictures, one picture of each of the stations where we do the sampling. And we'll start off with water quantity. Excuse me while I catch up. So this first graph this is again in orange, the HCSW1, and in blue dashed line, that is HCSW4. You see that this is the same creek, so there's the same peaks and the same valleys, the same pattern in that flow, but HCSW4 is downstream. There's a lot more contributing area, and the stream is much larger. It's a larger order stream, so that's why you have it's just a difference in magnitude in flow. This is rainfall and stream flow. Oops, no it's not. That is rainfall and Npds discharge. So this is 2018. This just shows that it takes a while for the wetlands to fill up, and then it was even a while after that before Mosaic discharged any water. And the reason that the 2018 graph is a bit more interesting than the 2017 graph is 2017 there was no discharge at all by Mosaic. So there was no Npds discharge on Horse Creek in 2017. We'll show that again in another graph. So they don't discharge every year, but when they do, it looks a lot like this, where there's a lot of flow, and then they begin to discharge, and then when they no longer need to discharge, they stop discharging, and that typically coincides with the end of the rainy season. So again, this is showing just where 2018 fell as far as rankings of discharge. So the left-hand column is the year, the middle column is the amount that is discharged, and the right-hand column is rank. So the year that they discharged the most water was 2003. If you go all the way to the bottom, you see in 2017 there was no discharge at all. 2018 just fell right in the middle at number 9. So water quality results, Mike mentioned conductivity quite a bit in his presentation, and that's one of the reasons we've used this graph. We talk ad nauseum in these meetings about the water quality parameters, and what we find in most of them is that there's no significant trend over time. And one of the other things that we see often is that the water quality upstream tends to be a little bit, things like conductivity, TDS, sulfate, things like that are lower in the upper basin than they are in the lower basin. So as an example, here we have conductivity. The blue line that's kind of in the background there, that is closest to mining. It has the lowest conductivity or lower conductivity than the red line, which is farthest away from mining. So as you are working downstream, the conductivity is increasing, and that is indicating exactly what Mike had said, an increase in irrigation water. So you're withdrawing groundwater that is making its way to the creek, and that irrigation water is higher in conductivity than the water that is in the upper basin. So some of the conclusions that we've drawn for 2018, there were 24 times that there were water quality notifications. So 24 times there was a number that was higher than those trigger levels. HCSW1, which is the closest to any mining activity, the closest to the Npds discharge, the closest to their outfalls, that had only one notification, and it was 495 days after the last discharge. So you would expect that if there were mining-related impacts, that those would show up closest to the mining and also closest in time to the mining. What we have here is that the least number of notifications is closest to mining, and those occurred 495 days after the last discharge. So what that shows us is that in 2018 there was no significant impact by any mining activities on Horse Creek. HCSW2 had notifications relating to dissolved oxygen and ammonia. And ammonia had a problem with the lab blank and the field blank, and so those were discounted. The dissolved oxygen, sulfate, TDS, and ammonia that we find in HCSW2, 3, and 4, those were all found to be related to low flow conditions and coupled with the non-mining land use activities, irrigation, things like that, which is consistent with what Mike had said during his presentation on the Peace River. So, this is part of our fish sampling effort. Those fish are all returned to the creek in case anyone is concerned, and we may or may not be able to divulge the exact location if you're interested. So first, with biology, we'll look at the macroinvertebrate taxa richness. We're going to show these, but there was no significant trend in these data. This is a 4-panel graph on the left showing HCSW1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Those scatter plots just show that sometimes there's a lot of macroinvertebrate taxa, sometimes not. Could be resulting in the flow conditions at that time, how long that water had been at the level. There are certain standards that must be met to conduct the sampling, but a lot of times those, even sampling within those standards has some variation. The next slide is SCI scores. Again, on the left panel is HCSW1, HCSW2 is second, then 3, then 4. What you note here is that these are the SCI scores, and SCI scores it's a large range of scores, but they categorize them into exceptional, which is the highest, healthy, which is the middle of the road, and impaired. What you see here is that HCSW1, 3, and 4 typically are healthy or impaired when looking at SCI scores. I'm sorry, healthy or exceptional when looking at SCI scores. HCSW2 is typically healthy or impaired. It kind of goes back and forth, but you can see that they're lower at HCSW2. And what the TAG and the Water Supply Authority and Mosaic and Flatwoods have all been discussing over the years is why that is. And what we've all determined is that HCSW2 is simply acting more like a wetland, like a flow-through wetland than it is a stream. I mean, if you've ever walked around in the wetlands out here in the woods, you know you kind of get that anaerobic smell. It smells like rotten eggs sometimes. You know, that's basically an anaerobic condition. And there's a large prairie wetland that is immediately upstream of HCSW2, and that's holding water for a longer period of time. There's also a hanging culvert that is preventing flow, so you're not getting that kind of crystal clear, sandy bottom stream condition that you do have in the HCSW1, 3, and 4. So that is typically that is the reason And there's been discussion about moving that HCSW2 station to a different location to make sure that we can try to get a better assessment. However, anytime you've been sampling something for 17 years, if you move it, then you lose all the historical comparison, and simply there's not a lot of access that would get you the information that we want, which is both downstream of HCSW1 and upstream of HCSW3 that doesn't have that condition. So, but it is something we discuss every single year. And one thing you can't really see on this, but in statistical analysis, we determined that the only trend that we see in SCI scores is that HCSW1 actually has a slight increase in scores from 2007 to 2018. And the reason we say 2007 to 2018 is because in 2007, the method changed, and so the calculations were a little bit different. So if you look at 2007 to 2018, there's a slight uptick or an increase in scores, which is good. Oops, backwards. So the period of record results for macroinvertebrates, spring 2018 had the highest taxa richness at HCSW1, 3, and 4. It was also the highest diversity in 1 and 3. And like I said, the HCSW1 had an SCI positive trend, which is all excellent results. So fish species richness, again, this scatter plot just shows that sometimes you catch them and sometimes you don't. Could be flow. There's no significant trend related to fish here. And then the species accumulation curve. What you see here is HCSW1 is the black X, that's the lowest on the curve. And then you have the green squares, and then the gray triangles, those are the next two up. HCSW4 is the blue line, or sorry, the blue circles, and then combined are the red crosses. And what that's showing is that as you move downstream, you're getting more species of fish, which is exactly what you would expect given that it's a larger order stream, there's more contributing watershed, it's closer to Charlotte Harbor, things can move up and down. So that's exactly what you would expect a species accumulation curve to look like. And you can see that we just haven't added a whole lot of new species in the last few years. So in 2018, we caught 21 species, which is within the range historically captured. We've caught 44 species total. There's no increasing or decreasing trends when you combine stations. There's no increasing or decreasing trends for individual stations when you look at the different seasons. So finally, 16 years of data have been collected through 2018. So we had said 17 before. We're in the middle of our, I guess, 18th year at this point sampling right now. There's a robust quality assurance plan. There's input from various different counties, from an independent consultant from the Water Supply Authority. And this provides us with a baseline for the water quality and biological comparison as mining does progress through the Horse Creek Basin. And to date, there's been no mining-related impacts that have been observed. And that fish was not captured on Horse Creek, but it was in the Peace River earlier this year. Actually, early last year. So with that, I will take comments and questions unless you'd like to save them for the end.
Thank you, Shannon. Do any of our board members have any questions? Shannon? I have just one quick question for you, Shannon. What initiated the need for the Horse Creek Stewardship Program? How do we get started with that?
My understanding is that was a part of a settlement agreement between IMC, Agrico, and the Water Supply Authority back in the early 2000s when there were some challenges, when there were some legal, administrative challenges.
But according to all of this data we've compiled, it seems to be that that we have a healthy system there since we started this program, and it's operating as it should.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate your presentation. All right, we will
thank you.
move it along. I'd like to call Sherry Hustler up, the project scientist at Cardno.
Fun with long hair and earrings, sorry. Thank you all for the opportunity to present today. I will be talking about the Peace River Monitoring Program. So this is actually not within Desoto County, it's upstream, but as we've discussed earlier this morning, that water flows downstream, so it'll get here eventually. So I'm going to be talking about this program and a summary of results through 2019. That was the last report that was finalized and submitted, as well as a summary of just general trends and whatnot from 2012 through 2019. Is there a direction that I'm supposed to? All right, there we go. Sorry, I was aiming for the wrong thing. So the 5 areas that I'm going to talk about today is just a general program summary, kind of like Shannon just talked about with the Horse Creek Stewardship Program, water quantity results, water quality results, biological results, and then just overall general conclusions. So first of all, the program summary. The Peace River Monitoring Program, or you'll see represented throughout the rest of the presentation, is PRMP, was formed in 2012, and this was formed as a part of a settlement agreement between Mosaic, the Sierra Club, Minnesota 88, and the People for Protecting the Peace River. This is similar to Horse Creek. The goal of the program in this case was to ensure that there were no downstream impacts from mining activities at the South Fort Meade Hardy County facility. Like I mentioned before, the area of study is the upper Peace River Basin. So this encompasses on the north end from Fort Meade to the south end of Wauchula. And this program also has 3 components. There's monitoring and reporting on water quantity, there's monitoring and reporting on water quality, and then stream biology. First of all, for the water quantity monitoring, I know this map is a lot more involved, and that's because there's a lot of basins involved in this area. The main area of focus is that light blue. That is actually the whole Peace River Basin. You have some tributaries that are coming in from both the east and the west. The furthest downstream, you have Little Charlie Creek, which is over here. Then coming in from the west, you have Payne Creek. You also have Whitman Creek, and then the ocean. The next area for water quantity is rainfall as well. Rainfall is continuously monitored at Mosaic gauges, as well as some Swift mud gauges, and then a NOAA rainfall gauge. That NOAA rainfall gauge goes back, I believe, until in the 1940s, so there's a very long term of rainfall data at that location, and that's publicly available. And the last component of water quantity is for the Npds discharge. Outfall locations. For this monitoring program, there are 5 Mosaic mine facilities in which there are discharges located. A lot of the discharges actually go to Payne Creek, which is right here, and then here's all these discharges. There's one upstream, Little Charlie. one upstream in Whitman, and then to a couple other side branches. And the one of focus today is actually the South Fort Meade 001 outfall, and that one comes in just upstream of the County Line Road facility, or County Line Road, sorry, and that one is what the area focus of this program at this point. And if you're not familiar, there's a couple photos of what some of the discharges that are operating in this area actually look like. So similar to what both Mike and Shannon talked about, there are a number of water quality parameters that are monitored. There's actually 25 parameters that are monitored as part of this program, and this is monitored monthly. So it's very rigorous, and there's a lot of stations that this monitoring occurs at. They can be broken down into four main categories: your physiochemical, your nutrients with all your nitrogen components, as well as orthophosphate, total phosphorus, and chlorophyll A; dissolved minerals, which overarchingly can be described with the results of specific conductivity and TDS, which both these gentlemen talked about; and finally radiologicals in the form of total radium of a combination of 226 and 228. So to kind of hone in on those locations once again, here are the 11 monthly monitoring locations. There are 5 locations in the Peace River. There are 3 locations in Little Charlie Creek. There's a location in 3 of the tributaries: Bow Legs, Whitman, and Payne. All the parameters that I just had up on the screen are monitored monthly at every location. In addition, to repeat and have some more inspection on the Peace River itself, there are 4 biological locations. Those are monitored twice a year on a semi-annual basis, trying to aim for the dry season, so now through about May, when the water level is a little bit lower. And then the ultimate goal is to get the wet season, but as we all know, and you saw in some of the other hydrographs, these systems have been staying wet for a long time, like extending into October and November, so most of our sampling events have actually occurred in that November, December timeframe, and then we'll try to wait till March or April of the following year before that sampling happens. Similar, there's also habitat assessments that are performed to evaluate the overall quality of the stream itself and the stream condition index, or SCI, of the benthic macroinvertebrate sampling that occurs. There's also fish sampling, both active forms with the seine nets and backpack electrofishing. So this project also has an annual report, and for this annual report, it's actually due by the 15th of the subsequent year. So I'm in the process of working on the 2020 report right now, because it'll be due to the different organizations by the 15th of February. Within this report, there's a graphical summary of the current year's rainfall, stream flow, stream gauge, Npds discharge for the quantity. There's also some tables that give summaries on what does the 10th percentile, the median, 90th percentile. We do a correlation analysis that look if there are relationships between those quantity parameters, and we look at the combination of rainfall, stream flow, and the discharge. There's also graphical and tabular summaries of the water quantity data, or quality data, I'm sorry. And all of those parameters are compared to Class 3 surface water quality standards for fresh water where applicable. There are actually not too many that apply, but where there are, they are compared to those surface water standards. And then I had mentioned that there were multiple locations that were sampled within Peace River itself and Little Charlie Creek. So to try to see if there are any differences between the data that was collected at each of those locations, we do an analysis of variance, and that'll tell you if there's a difference among the stations, if one might be higher or lower for a various constituent. And that can kind of give you an indication on, is something going on that we need to be concerned about? Is it only happening at that location? Is it happening in 1 year? So it's a good indicator of the overall water quality in those two systems. And there's also a correlation analysis that are done between the water quantity parameters, stream flow, rainfall, and discharge, with those water quality parameters to look at, are they changing in the same direction or are they changing oppositely? For the biology side, within the annual report, there's a photographic summary of the current year's conditions, just to have a reference of, you know, did a tree fall? Did something happen at that site, just so we know what was going on? We have a tabular summary of the SDI and habitat assessment results, and then graphical summary of the overall patterns and habitat assessment, SCI, and in macroinvertebrate taxa. For fish, very similarly, we have a summary of what was collected via the different method within each station, and then we have a graphical summary of the total individuals and total taxa caught over time. We've also kind of done a thing where we've combined everything that was caught to see if there was differences between stations. So we have the cumulative total of PRMP 2, 4, 10, and 11 to try to see if there was any differences overall. And that's also analyzed with a Morosita index, similarity index, and a species accumulation curve. So first, water quantity results. We're going to be looking at the top graphic of this one, the bar graph. So first for rainfall, as you would presume, the heaviest rainfall occurred from June to August, which is part of the wet season. In 2019, actually September was an atypically low year, but October there was actually a decent amount of rainfall that kind of made up for that low amount in September. Then the bottom graph, we have stream flow. So this graphic is showing the rainfall, the average of all the gauges that are used in this report in the black bars. And then the nested lines are actually the 3 USGS gauges that we're using for stream flow within the Peace River. So Fort Meade is the furthest north, and it's the smallest nested line. Bowling Green, that's the one is at County Line Road, that's in purple. And then in that light aqua is the Outfall Springs, that's the furthest downstream. So as you would assume, the further you get down in the basin, the higher your stream flow is, and they all nest within each other. In 2019, we saw stream flow similar to historical patterns with highest flows during the wet season months of July through mid-September. There were smaller peaks in January and February, as well as October. And actually, the 10th, 50th, and 90th percentile flows, the historical totals, compared to the historical totals, 2019 was higher than all 3 of those for the 3 Peace River stations, along with Whitman Creek and Payne Creek. So 2019 was a very wet year, and there was a lot of stream flow reflected with that. As far as Npds discharge goes, we looked at a couple things here. So first of all, we wanted to look at everything that was upstream of Bowling Green, which there are 3 outfalls, the one that we're mainly concerned about, the South Fort Meade 001, as well as 2 Hooker Prairie outfalls 003 and 05. And basically, if you took all of the days that there was discharge across the entire year, all the Npds discharge, it only accounted for 7% of the daily stream flow within the Peace River at that County Line Road gauge. So it's not a very high number whatsoever. And that mainly was supplemented during the wet season before the river started kicking off was where you saw that lag, was generally when that occurred. And as far as the lower Peace River, or the lower part of the basin that we're looking at, is the bottom graph. So Payne Creek, that was a site that had a bunch of the outfalls that were coming in from the west. And within that system, it's the green that's showing up on this graph, and it only accounts for 12% of the daily stream flow on average. So once again, not a major contributor to the Peace River in general. And within that system, there's actually one of the outfalls is a kind of a flow-through system, so it's constantly going to have flow, so that kind of elevates that number as well. As far as correlations go, as one would expect, stream flow and rainfall are positively correlated with each other. Makes sense that, and there are strong correlations, so in this case you want a value of 0.5 or higher. That means there's a good agreement, and in this case, or for this report, it was anywhere from like 0.7 to 0.9, so a very strong correlation. So the system, the river is reacting to rainfall within the basin. We also found Npes discharge was correlated with stream flow and gauge height, either at the station downstream or in general. And all that's trying to show you is that the flow is more of an indication, not necessarily where it's located. So it's kind of a moot point as far as that's concerned. So the takeaway point here, though, is Npes discharge does not change the pattern of flow in the Peace River downstream of the outfalls. So we're moving on to water quality. With looking on the parameters that had Class 3 water quality standards, there were no exceedances. So none of the data that was collected on a monthly basis was above or below the standard, depending on what that was for 2019. However, when you looked at the Peace River, the station, or the system that had 4 regular monitoring stations, as well as Little Charlie Creek that had 3, there were some significant differences among stations that we found with the ANOVA analysis, which is not surprising because you have some stations, especially in the Peace River, that are further up in the basin. And then, like Mike had talked about, some of the lower ones come in after Whitman Creek, so there's still some of that influence that shows up within the data. And just other influences from agriculture runoff, because as you're all aware, that water's coming from the Florida aquifer, which has a higher conductivity. And so some of those parameters as well, the ions, magnesium, calcium, sodium, things of that nature, may be higher downstream because of that. There were 12 parameters that had concentrations that were negative correlations. Basically, those parameter concentrations decreased as there was more stream flow or more rainfall. So the wetter it was, the lower they were. And there were 7 parameters that had positive correlations, or basically those parameter values went up as there was more rainfall and stream flow. And some of those parameters make sense because with their turbidity, TSS, things that are dissolved in the water, and that as there's going to be more flow, there's going to be more stream action, and you're going to kick up more things within the bottom of the river. So that makes total sense. And then some of it also has to do with the time of year. You'll see higher values, especially with Chlorophyll A. Your wetlands are now full. All that stagnant water is in high color water is kicked off into the stream, and they'll show up at higher levels during the wet season. Just a couple notes on the tributaries. So Bow Lakes Creek, which is our PRMP 3 station, which comes in Mount Pisgah Road, almost in Fort Meade. That one had the highest total radium measurements compared to the other monitoring stations, but it was still well below the standard of 5 picocuries per liter. There's no current mining discharge in that system, so the cause is not known at this time. I haven't had a chance, or any sort of investigation I've found hasn't led to why that has occurred, but just a general note if you see the report and you notice that those are higher. Whitman Creek, which Mike talked about, had the highest orthophosphate and total phosphorus concentrations in general throughout the year. The interesting thing to point out here, though, is that there were lower concentrations of total phosphorus during the months where Mosaic's outfall was discharging. So that was helping to flush the system of any residuals, and it's actually a positive sign that that outfall was helping to clear the system of that higher phosphate within it. Whitman Creek also had the highest ion concentrations, but that was already covered with the closure of US Agrochem's phosphogypsum stat, but this was temporary. It was more along the 2012 range where the higher concentrations, that was when that ended and needing to meet the standard occurred. So since 2012 and when this program happened, we've seen those concentrations actually come down. And at this point, there is no mining currently in Whitman Creek by Mosaic. The other thing to talk about just within the report is that one of the parameters that had some kind of higher than normal measurements was turbidity, and this was in June 2019. The things to point out is that, so Mike's sample occurred on June 6th. This sample was actually taken on June 25th, so it's the first set of diamonds that you see in this graph. So this first set right here, that's June. The next one is actually July. And what was interesting is that for the June sampling event, it occurred after 12 days of large rainfall events where the cumulative total was anywhere from 5.5 to almost 8 inches. So that kicked up all the turbidity, and that's why that was elevated within the Peace River. It wasn't as high in some of the tributaries because they probably already had some lower flow. And then in addition to that, there was also a month of discharge from Lake Hancock to supplement flows because May was pretty dry, and so in order to make sure that the MFL and that you have flow within the system, water was supplemented from Lake Hancock, which has excuse me, some higher chlorophyll and other concentrations, which would have led to this turbidity. The elevated event in July was also after a large rainfall event within a The habitat assessment scores have fallen within the optimal or suboptimal category for all stations since monitoring began. So as you can see, all those diamonds for each station, they're on the higher end of that score. Any differences we might see in score has to do with how wide the system is at that point, how much productive habitat you actually have available, and just what was our the velocities that were seen at each site. That's kind of what have differed in the scores. For the SDI results, all but one score have been either healthy or exceptional from 2012 to 2019. That one lower score that you see on here that occurred actually in December of 2019, that was at PRNP10, that was at Herd Bridge Road. That was mainly because there was a native serrate crown snail species, so it's a good thing that it's there, but based on how the SDI protocol happens, or how you have to follow it, even though there was a bunch of other good species there, it just so happened to be in part of what was picked, and so it dominated the sample and kind of lowered that score. But the thing to note here is that PRNP4, which is the site that's at County Line Road, that one has always had passing SDI scores. And in most instances, with the exception of I think 2 events, it has actually had the highest SDI score. For fish species, in 2019, there were 560 fish representing 12 families and 18 species that were collected via backpack electrofishing and small seining. We have a couple pictures of some invasives that we've started to see within the basin. So you might think that's just a regular eel. It's actually an Asian swamp eel. So what's interesting about them is they have no dorsal fin. So if you're out fishing and you happen to see, you're like, why does this eel look weird? It's actually an invasive species. So if you catch it, don't put it back in the water. The other one that there's different types of armored catfish. These were either vermiculated or sailfin catfish. And then I don't have a picture of it, but we had blue tilapia. And there are different tilapia species within the Peace River, and what's interesting about them is they hybridize, so you might think you have one, but you might have to have someone who's an expert idea because they can interbreed, which is a little bit frustrating. Just overall, the most species that were caught were coastal shiners, followed by eastern mosquito fish and gold and silverside. So these are all small fish, probably in like this realm of size. Not too large. And from 2012 to 2019, there was a total of 36 species have been caught in the Upper Peace River Basin. Fish diversity was also measured with the Shannon Diversity Index. Since May of 2015, and why I point that out is we had a methodology change. We used to have an active and passive sampling, so we used to have we used to have a beach seine, and then we'd have fyke nets that were deployed. But because one of the fyke nets was stolen during one of the sampling events, we found that that wasn't actually good for data collection. So we went with 2 active methods. So since May 2015, fish diversity has ranged from 0.28 to 2.44, and this is on an overall scale of 5, but you want to compare within the range of what's actually caught within your system. For 2019, the diversity ranged from 1.35 to 244, and December was 1.5 to 2.2. So pretty similar in general. When looking at all the sampling events combined by station, PRNP2, which is the furthest upstream, actually had higher species diversity, but it wasn't much. And there were no significant differences between stations. So that's something to point out, is that even though there were some differences overall, there were no statistically significant difference between those stations. So for our conclusions, while there are multiple Npds discharges within the Upper Peace River Basin, they only counted for about 12% of the overall stream flow in 2019. The discharge did not change the pattern of flow downstream of the outfalls. And at present, there's no reason to expect any change in water quality as a result of mining activities in the study area. There are also no exceedances of the Class 3 standards within the Peace River in 2019. There's stable habitat assessment and STI scores, and PRMP4 closest to the South Fort Meade outfall always had passing scores and generally had the highest. Fish species diversity varied between stations, but there was not a significant difference, and that changes. And the structure was mainly a function of distance between station pairs and not related to mining. So that is all I have. I'll welcome any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Sherry. I'd like to ask our board members if they have any questions for our presenter. No. I do have one quick question for you, Sherry. Could you give an opinion just strictly pertaining to water quality about why the closure of an operation adjacent to Whitman Creek would negatively affect water quality? Seems counterintuitive to me.
So that was a special case. There's actually a document out on that. And from 2007 to 2012, FDEP allowed a higher concentration of conductivity to be discharged in order to have a rapid closure of that facility, because it was closed. It was not necessarily derelict, but it just needed to be finally put out of commission as far as that goes. So it was staged with higher conductivity concentrations allowed for a certain period of time, and then it had to meet the standard of 1275 in 2012. So that's an exception to the rule. It's not a normal situation, but DEP allowed it just because they wanted a rapid closure of the facility.
Thank you. What would I look to find that document? What would I look or Google so I could read it?
Now that I just closed this, I had the reference. I can let you know about that. I have the reference in there. I think it was an FDEP document, but I had the reference in my presentation.
Okay, I should have that then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sherry. Just two questions. With this being part of a settlement agreement between Mosaic, Sierra Club, Minnesota 88, and people protecting Peace River, the PR3, I would assume that they kind of had the same situation as we have with the Horse Creek Stewardship Program, and that these results are collected and provided to all three of those members.
The report is provided annually, yes,
okay.
to them.
And so my question is, historically, from 2012 going forward, has there been a lot of dialogue between those groups? Have you gotten a lot of responses, questions, challenges as you've provided those annual reports to the three settlement party agreement?
The only time that we had actually gotten questions on the report was after the first one in 2012. And some of those questions were actually submitted as part of the area-wide EIS.
Okay. And then the second question I had was, and this may not be as relevant, but when you talk about the MFL decisions and the releases from Lake Hancock, is that program, the releases from Hancock, is that driven by SwiftMud, those decision makers?
Yeah, that is SwiftMud that is controlling that dam, because it comes on I think the southwest side through the wetland treatment system. That's where the water comes from. And there's two USGS gauges where you can actually check that. There's Peace Creek that comes in from the southeast. And then there is the release from Lake Hancock, and they're both kind of tabulated, and how I can tell what the quantities were is that there's a USGS gauge at it's Peace River at Bartow.
So those are the two gauges where the MFLs measured for release decisions?
That is where where you can tell that there's water being discharged, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sherry.
Any more questions? We're good, thank you.
I think we're good.
All right.
All right, I'm going to go over a couple things before we go into our public comment period. Like I mentioned earlier, first we'll be doing our in-person public comments, and then we'll go to our virtual public comments. This is the third in a series of informational workshops that the Commission is holding on the subject of phosphate mining in Desoto County. These workshops are not hearings, and they will not result in the County Commissioners making any decision about phosphate mining. The workshops provide an opportunity to share information with County Commissioners, county residents, and other interested persons, and they allow the Commissioners to discuss that information in compliance with the Sunshine Law. This series of workshops will be held until January 2023, and the exact schedule for these workshops has not been fully set, but we expect to hold a workshop every 3 or 4 months. We've been delayed somewhat due to COVID-19, but we hope to get back on schedule now. Each workshop will concentrate on a specific topic concerning phosphate mining. Our earlier workshops had focused on the county's ordinances and comp plan concerning phosphate mining, and they also provided a basic general overview of phosphate mining. Today's workshop will focus on phosphate mining water quality monitoring programs. Today we will not be discussing Mosaic's applications for phosphate mining or its plans to mine in Desoto County. We're very happy to have our members of the public here today. I would like to emphasize though that if you're here to talk about Mosaic's applications or plans to mine in Desoto, it may be best that you come back to a future workshop. Other workshops will focus on other areas and other topics of interest that will be interesting to the board as well as the public. These topics are identified and those notices will be provided. So again, today is strictly about phosphate mining water quality monitoring programs. The virtual component for today's workshop, if you're attending remotely, it is very important that you keep your line muted until you're called on, and remember to use the hands up signal to get in the queue to make a comment. Again, I'd like to remind you that no action will be taken today at today's workshop. We're not here to talk about applications filed by Mosaic. The earliest that the board will consider any applications by Mosaic will be January 2023 or after, and it may even be sometime after that when permit or zoning applications are considered by the board. As chair, I do intend to keep order during this workshop. Disruptive behavior, duplicative, or off-topic comments will not be allowed. I'd like us all to be respectful of one another and stay on topic. And again, our topic is phosphate mining water quality monitoring programs. Everybody will have 3 minutes to speak today, and I'll give you a reminder at 1 minute so you know to wind it down. Thank you very much. Does any member of the board wish to add anything? No. All right, first I would like to call Ms. Cynthia Compton.
Good morning. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak before you and let our voice be heard. A lot of very impressive information has been offered today.
Ms. Cynthia, could I ask you, I apologize, just to state your name and address for the record?
Sure, it's Cynthia Compton at 1375 River Lane. There's information that is very important that doesn't seem to get addressed because while they're trying to educate us and justify the means to pollute our water, I just want to make sure you guys know what information you may want to take into consideration when decision time is made. Because this earth was created perfectly. Our water was drinkable, bathable, perfect. And the nations were enraged, and your wrath came, and the time came for the dead to be judged, and the time to reward your bondservants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, the small and the great, and to those who do, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. And I saw the dead. That's in Revelation, I forget what chapter. And I saw the dead and the great and the small standing before the throne, and books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to keep it on the subject that we're here for today.
This has to do with clean water.
Which is water quality
yes.
monitoring programs.
Yes, it does, because it states in here what happens if you do not make the right decisions in keeping the water quality perfect. You will be judged, okay? I just want to make sure you know you will be judged. I've had a dog my entire life. It wasn't until I moved to the west coast of Florida that I am unable to bathe my dog because the water quality is so polluted and distorted and disgusting. I see the smile on your face. My dog's in the car. You want to see him?
You have 1 minute left, just so you know.
These people are destroying the quality of our water. They create pollutants. They want to hold 9 billion gallons of water, and you think they can securely do that? You may want to ask the people of Bartow how that worked out for them. And then they want to take it down Pine Level, Horse Creek. Why don't you talk to the people about the quality of the water that they have had to fill their troughs with and then sicken their horses and cattle and chickens?
Ma'am, I think that the 9 billion gallons of water that you're talking about is our drinking water supply at the Water Authority, at the water plant.
That's fine, that's fine. This would not be the right thing to do if you had to have these workshops.
Thank you, Ms. Compton. That's your time. I'd like to call Mr. Michael Anthony Zarzano. And if you would, remember to please state your full name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Anthony Zarzano, and I live in Englewood. I will not give my address to my home. The water quality...
Let me stop you for just 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Is there a problem?
No.
Okay, good. The water quality in this state has been destroyed over a long period of time. Mosaic mining has dissolved the quality of water by their destruction of the land. It's as if a big grinder, a mosaic grinder, has went through the central part of Florida and just ground up the dirt 30, 40 feet below the surface for miles and miles and miles to supply a communist regime called China.
Wait a minute.
With phosphate.
We're talking about water quality.
And I'm talking about water quality. The water quality has been disturbed because there's a company that has chose to now supply a communist regime called China.
I'm sorry, sir, but you're going to have to keep it on topic if you want to keep talking.
The water quality is being destroyed at the cost of supplying communist Chinese with phosphate to grow their crops. These are the same people, the butchers of Beijing.
Sir,
how can you sleep at night knowing
I'm trying to respectfully ask you to keep it to water quality.
I would ask that you quit interrupting my attempt to demonstrate that the water quality in Florida is being destroyed because this company decides to supply communist Chinese with phosphate to grow their crops. That's why our water quality is being destroyed. The watershed starts in north central Florida and goes all the way down to Lake O. And recently, when the gates were opened at the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee, within 2 months, we had algae and red tide growth south of the Caloosahatchee.
Creek is already being polluted up the river from Manatee. I want to thank you for your time today. We cannot have this Mosaic chemical plant. Thank you kindly, everybody. God bless America. We live in the greatest country in the world. Don't anybody ever mistake that.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to call Ms. Carol Muller next.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate
Ms.
learning
Carroll,
about...
could I ask you for your name and address?
Oh, thank you
ma'am.
for the reminder. Carol Mahler, I live at 5578 Woodlawn Terrace here in Desoto County.
Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder. Thank you for the opportunity to speak also. I was happy to learn about the water quality monitoring programs that are here in Desoto County. And I appreciate the phenomenal amount of work that has been put into those programs to give us data that is extremely important. I'm very impressed that we have data from the Minnesota Regional Water Authority that go back 40 years. But I am concerned that we do not have any data from more than 100 years ago. It was in 1918 when the citizens of Arcadia said that the Peace River was too polluted because of phosphate mining activities upriver to swim in, to fish in. And they advocated building a public pool, which was accomplished when Ryan's Pool was built in 1920. So although we have this present day data, we can't understand really the health and the habitat and the water quality that we once had historically, unless somebody can find some data from those years past. And I think that that is relevant to what is happening today. We need water. It is the one thing that we have to have. And what happens to the land happens to the water. We can't think of them as two separate things. They're together. So, although I applaud and am grateful for the water quality monitoring programs that we have today, and grateful to all of the scientists and experts who just expend tremendous energy in keeping those up, I do think that we need to consider the bigger picture, the historical perspective, because we don't know how to go forward until we know where we've been. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I'd like to call Ms. Sarah Hollenhorst up. Again, just a reminder, please state your name and address for the record. And I think instead of interrupting you to tell you have 1 minute, I'll just hold a one up. Maybe that'll make it a little bit better.
Thank you, Commissioners, for letting me speak. I'm Sarah Hollenhorst, 9347 Southwest Raccoon Trail, Arcadia. I submitted a broader statement, and I'll read the intro to my statement here. I'm representing EcoSwift, Environmental Confederation of Southwest Florida, when I speak. All right. Our water resources, the Florida aquifer, our rivers and streams, our recharging wetlands are the most important asset to the future of Florida. Without clean, potable water and sustainable supply to meet the needs of the growing population of our state, water that supports our agriculture and our iconic wildlife, we have no future as a prosperous state. Without clean, uncontaminated headwaters, streams, and rivers that are the defining ingredient for productive estuaries that are the fish hatcheries for the Gulf, the fishing industry, the dolphins, the seabirds, and even the manatees will disappear. We have engaged in water wars with Georgia, yet we are failing to protect our own supply. We allow Mosaic to release diluted pollutants into our waters and streams and to store toxic waste at massive levels where accidents could destroy our supply and environment downstream and create contaminated sites that may be impossible to repair. Water containing diluted contaminant may meet standards worked out with the industry, but they don't disappear. There's a failure to monitor accumulation and the consequences of that accumulation into eventually the food chain. Testing, as well as population monitoring, should be done on the filter feeders downstream, the oysters, clams, mussels, where contaminants would accumulate and enter the food chain, including the fish, birds, and the public. They are a marker for pollutants, and their decline impacts those who feed in the seafood industry. Core samples need to be done downstream and into the Gulf of the estuary floors and out into the Gulf to test for the accumulation of the so-called diluted pollutants. The state needs to protect its aquifer, as Mosaic has failed to do. It has failed to justify the pumping of millions of gallons by Mosaic of potable water out of Florida's aquifer while citizens are forced to ration and salt water is allowed to intrude. The wetlands are necessary for recharging the aquifer, and filtering streams are destroyed by Mosaic and replaced with unproven artificial attempts. Our water supply authority needs to recognize that one of the greatest threats to the state's future is a threat to our water supply. Mosaic, with their excavation of millions of acres that make up the watersheds of our rivers and streams and the upper layers of the aquifer and the toxins the industry produces, is one of the greatest risks. It is time to end phosphate mining in Florida. The following is my further argument why, and I ask that it be included in any consideration when making any decision regarding Mosaic and allowing it to establish itself in Desoto County. And I submitted the rest of the statement to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. I'd like to call Mr. Cody Phillips up next to speak. Again, a reminder to state your name and address for the record, and I'll hold a little sign up when you got a minute left.
Good morning. My name is Cody Phillips. I live in Lakeland, Florida. I'm a fifth generation Lakelander and Polk County resident. I got two important issues that I'd like to kind of hit on in my small allotted time of 3 minutes, which is really unfortunate. The first one is there's a facility in Hillsborough County. It's the Plant City Mosaic facility. And there's a small community to the west of this facility. It's called Crystal Springs. Well, Crystal Springs historically had their own artesian well the last 100 years. And it wasn't that long ago. And the records are archived through newspapers, state, county, Swift Mud. You can pull the records, the records are pretty easily accessible. Crystal Springs artesian well had to be capped and shut down from public consumption. And it hasn't been very long ago. And the records will show that it was directly attributed to the Plant City Mosaic operations. My second point is that, like I said a moment ago, I'm a fifth generation Polk County. My family's been in the cattle business for a long, long time. I stand up here with lots of emotion and a lot of kind of a little bit of, you can hear it in my voice. It's something that really touches my heart. My family was some of the first people to establish commercial cattle operations on previously mined sites in Central Florida and Polk County.
This is going to tie back into water quality?
It surely does, absolutely. Historically, the cattle that we ran on these previously mined sites, we have to switch them out every 6 to 9 months because the cattle start to experience fluorosis, bone density loss of teeth, the water.
From water?
Well, sure, from the water, from the radon that's leaching out of the soil into the air, affects cattle. My family has ran thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cattle through these operations through the years, and I can tell you, a cow just can't make a living on sugar, on sand tailings. This stuff won't even hardly grow. Sand spur. Sand spurs will grow on it. A lot of coggin grass will grow on it too.
That's your time, Mr. Cody. I appreciate you sharing, and I'll do a little more research on that spring too.
Sure, yeah, Crystal Springs, yeah, it's widely known, sure.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call Ms. Vicki Steiner. Again, I'll just give you a little reminder to state your name and address and keep your talking points on the agenda that we have today.
Vicki Steiner, 7211 Southwest Environmental Lab Street. Thank you for listening to me. 3 minutes is not long enough. I'm sorry, but it's not. My husband and I and our deep well live a quarter mile from Horse Creek. Water is life. Water is life. Within a half mile is the plant storage mountain of heavy metals and toxic chemicals that are a result of the phosphate mining, one of their planned big football-sized field toxic slime ponds. The scheduled and unscheduled releases of this toxic slime pond will undoubtedly reach the Horse Creek and my well, and then on down to the Peace River Water Authority that supplies the Desoto and Sarasota counties, finally reaching Charlotte Harbor, full of threatened manatees and other wildlife, Cape Hayes Aquatic Preserve, Boca Grande and Gasparilla Island State Park, Key Acosta State Park, and then finally into the Gulf of Mexico. You cannot allow them to do this anymore. You cannot allow a company to profit at the expense of the environment and so many people. Even if Mosaic wanted to, there is no way they can guarantee and protect us protect us and the Peace River from any terrible future spill. This is a limited resource. Now is the time to stop phosphate mining before they ruin the whole region and the economy even more, just like ghost town Wauchula. Crops can be raised without fertilizer. It's already being done. We need to look into the future and stop the destruction. My family was taking a walk in Morgan Park last week and I came across a sign made by Southwest Florida Water Management District, SwiftMud, that you all abide by. It was formed back in 1961. I gave you all a picture. I don't know if you've seen it yet. The sign reads, water runoff containing fertilizers and pesticides can create toxic conditions in water bodies. Use environmentally safe products and never overuse products. Let's follow SwiftMud's policies. They've got it right. Fertilizer and pesticides are bad enough, but benign compared to what Mosaic plans on releasing into Desoto County tributaries. They also admitted that they very seldom are monitored by the state officials when doing these releases up to several times a day. I'm sorry, but I don't trust them. And I just have a question that I want to follow up a question that Mr. Desoto asked the first presenter about what happens when the year's worth of backup water supply is gone from our water authority. They had no answers. They just said, well, we hope it won't last for a year, which is ridiculous.
Not acceptable.
What is our contract?
Your time is up, Ms. Vicki.
All right.
Thank you for bringing this one. Thank you. I would like to ask those folks too that are out there in the public, while people are presenting, please keep some decorum and don't add your own comments. You do not have the floor. If you would, Brooks, state your name and address for the record, and I'll give you a little one sign whenever you got a minute left.
Brooks Armstrong, 7301 Reg Rainey Road. I have hard copies here. Can I pass these out? And I've made 5 copies for the commissioners. Whether you want them or not, I'll pass them out.
That's fine.
These are, this hard copy is from Mr. Andy Mealy, and he's not here today. He has,
Mr. Armstrong, we do have Andy Mealy submitted via email.
That's what I was
6 page,
saying.
yes sir, we do.
Okay, so just if you, this gives you an additional reference there. I don't know if he's going to present via Zoom today. I haven't been able to reach him today, but I just, maybe I can get through a couple of things here that are on page 4. If you turn to page 4, and this is related to our water quality because, as you know, the new Wales facility, which is a gypsum stack fertilizer plant in Hillsborough County, I believe it is, had a sinkhole release in 2016. They've had some problems up there, in other words. But on page 4, you can see the Environmental Protection Agency's toxic release inventory for the year 2018, I think he's got here, 2019 and 18, different years, of various metals, heavy metals. I did have a question for Mr. Gonzalez. Are our questions to come later or during this process? It was very...
I think if you go ahead and pose the question now, he can respond to it when your time's up.
Okay. He mentioned that there are 17 parameters, inorganic compounds that are measured in the water quality monitoring. I'd like to know what those are. Because we have a few that, maybe right on this list that maybe I didn't see mentioned, like such as mercury, chromium, lead, things that might come from a Gymstack or a clay settling area, but I'm not an expert on this subject. Now, I just...
You have 1 minute left, Mr.
Okay, thanks.
Armstrong.
Okay. There is an issue that has been pointed out on this paper, that there's a difference between the total accumulation of these toxic elements and the percent quantity that occurs at any given time. In other words, how much of this stuff it's maybe a 10% or a 5% at one time settles to the bottom of the Peace River somewhere and stays there and accumulates forever. Do we think about that? Does this get sucked back up into our water supplies? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next I'd like to call Caitlin Chase. And a reminder, please state your name and address for the record and stay on topic. I'll give you a little sign that is 1 minute left. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Chase. I'm not going to give you my address, but I live in Fort Myers, Lee County. I have friends that live here in Desoto County that live really close to Horse Creek. I live on the Gulf, and I'm affected by red tide year after year these past few years, along with the blue-green algae that comes down our way. So I'm here as a concerned citizen of the Gulf area and also for my friends that also live here. I have some questions that I want to pose. I would like to know who this third-party consulting group is. There was multiple mentions of Mosaic tests, but also a third-party consult does. I would like to know who that group is, and also can we get more groups to consult instead of just Mosaic? I think it would be beneficial to have more than just one other group to consult and actually get multiple, answers back and data. I think that would be really important for our water quality monitoring. Also in 2017 and 2018 were really bad storms that we had. You had mentioned that those were the times that you had big releases and you saw big nutrients in our water. So I pose another question. We have a lot more climate change that's going to be affecting us, a lot more storms that are going to happen. Is this going to be affecting these facilities, these Gymstacks, these plants? And if so, what are more monitoring that you're going to be doing for this? I understand you already are, and it takes about a day and a half to respond to it if it gets down to the facility, so you have that kind of buffer. But that's what's happened in the past. Going forward, we're going to have a lot more storms, climate change coming through. We have some facilities that are already on the Tampa Bay, that are already on water. Is this going to affect them? So that I would like to know. Is there going to be a lot more water quality monitoring to defend against these storms that we know are going to be happening in the future? Other facilities in Florida have had sinkholes. What are you doing to monitor that and protect the water quality from that? These sinkholes that are allowing this material to go right into our aquifer, that's something I would like to also make sure that is being monitored really well. That not only the stuff that's getting discharged off-site, but in accidents that are happening right on site that are going straight to the aquifer that have happened years before and still are not cleaned up. We know that for a fact. It's still not cleaned up, but we're trying to get that cleaned up, but we're asking for more permits. So that's something I'd like to know. Is that harming our water quality at all? What are we doing to monitor that? You feed the world. That's your quote, you feed the world. But we know for a fact there's other ways to feed the world. There's regenerative agriculture. There's food forests that don't rape our lands, but actually give back to it. There's plants that put nutrients into our lands versus ripping it out. Can we look at that?
Are you still on the water quality?
That's water quality, yes, sir. Because instead of raping our lands and ripping it away and affecting water quality, this actually helps water quality. Instead of putting fertilizer on our crops, which we know goes into Lake Okeechobee, affects other water bodies, this is ways that does not affect water quality at all. In fact, helps it. There's plants that clean water. There's plants that can feed us that don't require fertilizer. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yes, ma'am.
To Ms. Caitlin's point, she made a good point and a good reference to groundwater. And so I just wanted to provide a statement that groundwater quality, as we all recognize, Mosaic recognizes, the county recognizes, is a huge, huge topic. And so today is just specific to the surface water discharge and the site that actually leaves Mosaic properties or mining properties. So we do intend to have further workshops because water quality, this one workshop will not cover all the water quality parameters associated with mining, and we recognize that. So thank you for pointing out the groundwater issue. So we will be having further workshops on different portions of water quality.
I would like to take a minute before we switch gears to the Zoom public comment to ask Mr. Mike if we could get maybe an answer to that question about those 17 parameters. Is that Brooks had posed? Is that Mr. Shannon?
So the 17 parameters were in the presentation, so if you have a copy of the presentation, you have a list of those. I don't know if you want me to read them all, but pH, dissolved oxygen, saturation, turbidity, color, total nitrogen, total ammonia, orthophosphate, chlorophyll A, specific conductance, total alkalinity, calcium, iron, chloride, fluoride, combined radium, sulfate, and total dissolved solids. Those are the 17 parameters that are listed. And again, they're listed on the trigger level slide if you have any questions or you want to reference those later. And if I could respond quickly to Caitlin's comments or questions. She'd asked who the third-party consultant was, and Mike, I hope you don't mind me stating this, but Earth Balance is a local environmental consulting firm that employs qualified scientists, engineers, geologists, and they're the third-party consultant for the Water Supply Authority and participate in all those meetings. In addition, I do want to point out that the technical advisory group itself is made up of experts, and so we've got engineers, geologists, and scientists with various levels of expertise in various disciplines that are all participating, so it's not just a single consultant who's there directing. There's input from a lot of qualified people during those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Do any members of the board have anything to add at this time? No. Okay, now we're going to go to the virtual public comment.